Hello everyone. 2020 has been without question a very challenging year. For us here in Australia, we started with the fires and then the storms and then COVID, and many people have had the most incredible challenges to face during the course of this year and will continue to face them. For one group of beings or phenomena, if you like, however, this has been a fantastic year. I'm talking about negative thoughts, negative cognition. There's a Zen master who once said, "Leave the front door and the back door of your mind open, allow thoughts to come and go, just don't serve them tea." And I think in 2020, not only have we left the front door and the back door of our minds open, we've actually rolled out the red carpet, we've pulled out the drinks cabinet, we've laid on a banquet, especially for the most negative, harmful and self-destructive of thoughts. Of course, the media have stirred it all up, don't they always? But we have taken this on board to such an extent, I don't think I've ever encountered such a prevalence of negative thought, negative thinking in conversations that we have, from the most trivial to the most important and high level. So what I really think is a useful thing to focus on today is taking back control of our own minds, our own mental bandwidth. Let's stop being thought victims and start deciding who we choose to entertain and who we want to occupy in our own minds. This idea of presenting a thought as an animated being may seem a somewhat unusual or weird idea to you, but it actually goes back millennia in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which I come from. There's a very famous sage called Shantideva who once said, "Delusions have no arms and no legs, they have no eyes, no wisdom. How is it then that I've been so used by them?" And I feel we're all being used by negative thoughts and negative cognition in particular. So I really wanted to just share with you what is in actual fact my favorite meditation, because I feel that if only everyone could understand and know this and practice it regularly, the world would be such a happier place. So it's going to be mind-watching mind meditation that I'd like to focus on the next few minutes. You know, it often occurs to me that it's kind of weird that from the day we're born till the day we die, every single experience we have is mediated through our mind. It's only because our minds participate in that event, that happening, that we know that it happened. If we were unconscious at the time, we would have no awareness of it. That's kind of obvious when you think about it. So mind is central to every experience that we have. And despite the centrality, this fundamental central point of mind, very few people ever stop to ask, what is mind? And I find this kind of weird because really mind is everything. Mind participates in everything that we experience. So understanding something about the nature of mind is really important. Now, we can approach answering that question from a number of different angles. For example, we could say, well, psychologists have a view on what mind is. You could say, well, neuroscientists, they know all about the brain. They would have some understanding about the nature of mind. Philosophers, too, could have some legitimate claim to understand what is the nature of human consciousness. But the only way that we can actually experience for ourselves directly the true nature of our own mind is through meditation. All those other methods I just mentioned are conceptual in nature. They're about models, hypotheses, they're concept, they're high-level things. However, when we meditate, we can actually directly and non-conceptually experience the true nature of our own minds. To illustrate what I mean by that, some years ago, there was a program on TV when I switched it on about cocoa plantation workers in Africa. It looked like a really dull program. I was about to turn it over, but something made me stop. And the reason that I stopped was the people doing the documentary were looking at all these guys who've been picking cocoa beans for, in some cases, decades in this plantation, all of whom had a really good conceptual, intellectual understanding of chocolate because they'd seen the billboards. They knew that they'd seen pictures of chocolate bars, etc., but they'd never actually tasted chocolate. And the reason I didn't turn over the program was because the documentary makers had brought lots of chocolate bars with them, and they were handing them out to these very excited plantation workers. Now you can imagine the smiles on their faces as they peeled open that foil and had their very first bite of chocolate. Amazing. They now had a personal, direct, non-conceptual understanding of chocolate. And that was of a completely different order from knowing about billboards and seeing photographs of packages and hearing second-hand reports from other people about chocolate. They now knew what chocolate was for themselves. The importance of this mind-watching mind meditation is we can also have our own, perhaps first, direct, non-conceptual experience of the nature of mind for ourselves. And I'm personally not aware of any other way we can do it apart from this meditation method. So to me, it's a profoundly important and extremely interesting, even exciting meditation to embark on. What might you recognize? What might you expect when you sit and focus on your own mind for yourself? Well, the very first thing that most people notice is that thoughts arise. They just come out of nowhere. In Buddhism, we often talk about how thoughts arise from the mind just like waves arise from an ocean. It's completely natural, completely normal. Don't beat yourself up if you have a thought when you're doing a mind-watching mind meditation. This in itself can come as a huge relief because, for example, if we're focusing on the breath or a body scan or a visualization or many other different types of objects of concentration, if we have a thought that's extraneous to that, that is an interruption, that's agitation. However, when we're doing mind-watching mind, if a thought arises, fantastic. That's arising from our own mind. It's of the same nature as mind. It will arise, abide, and pass. That is the natural order of things. However, our main challenge is not to engage with that thought, which is what most of us do. Most of us, sadly, are thought huggers. All it takes is for a thought to rise and we're giving that thought a big old hug, especially, in fact, if it's a negative thought. I don't know whether you've ever pondered on this, but it amazes me how we all have this perverse attraction to negative thoughts. I'll give you a very trivial but all too common example. A short while ago, I was in a coffee shop, standing waiting to order my coffee, and somebody said, "Oh, hi, David. Hi, I like your hair. Oh, thanks. I just went to the barber this morning. Oh, good. Okay." And off they go, and I give the matter no more thought. I order my flat white, and off I go and sit and I don't know what I did at the time. Anyway, that was me. I was happy enough. That afternoon, standing in a coffee shop, waiting for a coffee. Yes, I do sometimes have 2 a day. Somebody comes and says to me, "Oh, hi, David. Hi. What happened to your hair?" "Oh, I went to the barber this morning." "Oh, okay." Off they went. And I thought, what's wrong with my hair? My hair's perfectly all right. In fact, I bent down so I could see my head in the chrome reflected back from above where they have their cakes and so forth. Thought, there's nothing wrong with my hair. It's just the same it was this morning. Nothing's, it's not like a crow came and shattered it or something. It looks perfectly all right to me. And then I thought, well, who are they to talk about my hair anyway? They've got a terrible haircut themselves and dreadful dress sense. And plus, I don't even like that guy's girlfriend. I think, and I really can't stand her. And so all this kind of stuff starts coming out in my head, and I'm now, before you know it, I'm ordering my flat white, and I'm still thinking about it as I go to the table. And I was just thinking, the same weight of positive and negative, and yet which did I choose to focus on? The negative. We're all the same. We're all at it. We're all obsessive, compulsive thought huggers, but especially we reserve our special red carpet in the drinks cabinet to the most negative and self-destructive thoughts. So what can we do instead? Well, what is actually quite liberating is simply to discover for oneself that every thought you've ever had arises, abides, and passes. The only reason it can stay in your mind is if you energize it with your attention. The moment we withdraw our attention from a thought, it has nowhere to go. It just dissolves. And so learning to withdraw our attention from negative cognition is possibly the most useful skill that anyone can acquire. Imagine if every time you got really pissed off, you just thought, acknowledge, accept, let go. Acknowledge, accept, let go. Imagine how much more calm and peaceful and capable you would be if you did that rather than allowed it to continue as we do, which is focusing a lot of thought on negative cognition. Because the other thing that we discover, apart from the fact that every thought is temporary unless we energize it with our attention, is the fact that every negative thought leads to a negative feeling. The one leads directly to the other. Those of you who are cognitive behavior therapists, or perhaps have been on the receiving end of CBT treatment, including myself, will know that if you go to see a psychologist who practices this, and it's possibly one of the most widely practiced therapies in the world today, they will focus not on the real life event to which you attribute your negative feelings. They will focus on your thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations of that real life event, because that is what's truly making you unhappy. It's not the real life event itself, although of course we're convinced that it's the real life event. To give you an example, when I was 20, my girlfriend broke up with me. I was devastated. My parents were Scots people, very buttoned down, very reserved. Talking about emotions wasn't something that came naturally to them. So they sent young David off to the shrink. Hopefully he can sort him out. And so I went to see the psychologist, who said, "So David, what seems to be the problem?" I said, "Well, I'm really depressed." "Okay, well, why are you depressed?" Because my girlfriend dumped me." "I see. Well, you do realize that not every 20-year-old boy who's dumped by his girlfriend feels depressed." It was a very unhelpful observation, I thought at the time, but it was a true observation, because I knew for a fact only the week before a friend of mine who had also been broken up with by his girlfriend had been bouncing on his bed with a can of lager. I can still picture it in my mind. He was so over the moon that she had dumped him because he wanted to dump her and she had saved him the problem. So I knew that the real life event, i.e. being dumped by somebody, wasn't in fact the cause of my depression, but I didn't really have that clarity of thinking at the time. It was my beliefs, thoughts, and interpretations about that event that made me unhappy. And so in subsequent weeks, when I went to see the shrink, we went through all those beliefs, thoughts, and interpretations. And of course, one by one, he calmly but successfully demolished them until I came out thinking or feeling a whole lot better about things. And I had a far more accurate and incisive understanding of my situation. So when we do mind-watching mind meditation, not only are we managing our thoughts, which is really so important, we're also managing our feelings. In managing the one, we manage the other. So that's the other key benefit of practicing mind-watching mind meditation. And I'm afraid I'm just having to gallop over what is material I'd love to cover in many, many hours because we only have this very short time. And I want to give you just a little taste of this meditation before I leave. So I've talked about how by practicing mind-watching mind meditation, we can learn to acknowledge, accept, and let go of any negative thoughts as they arise, abide, and pass in our mind, and try to experience a bit of clarity, those gaps between thoughts. That's the one thing. I've talked about how when we do that, especially when it comes to negative cognition, if we are successful at being able to let go of these negative thoughts, they will no longer lead to negative feelings. But take all of that stuff and put it to one side, because this is where it gets really exciting. What we are trying to do here is experience the true nature of our own mind. And we haven't talked at all about that yet. Normally, when we try to observe our own minds for ourselves, we'll suffer one of two challenges. The first is agitation, which I've talked a bit about. The other is dullness, where we simply feel a bit sleepy, because basically our minds are used to us either being very, very accurate, very active, thinking far too much, or else we are going to sleep. We're not used to this situation of being very, very focused, very calm, but not agitated. So that's like a whole new zone we need to learn to become familiar with and get good at staying in. So what actually happens when we are able to, just for a few moments perhaps, catch a glimpse of the nature of our mind between thoughts? Well, the very first thing we notice about our mind is that it's naturally very clear. It's very lucid. Some writers and practitioners talk about the radiance or the brightness of mind, the light of mind, the clear light of mind. These are interchangeable phrases that are used to describe this clarity of mind. And when you think about it, if your mind was somehow concretized or solid in some way, then no thought or sensation could arise within it. No change would be possible. It's the very clarity of mind, the absence of anything else in mind, that enables so much stuff to rise, to emerge from it. just like waves arising from an ocean. So that clarity is perhaps the first thing that we become aware of. I think hopefully you all already are aware of the clarity of mind, but by doing this meditation, it really helps enhance and get an even tighter focus on this experience. The second thing we notice about mind is that it's actually boundless. It has no beginning and no end. In fact, talking about beginnings and ends it's like a category error. You can't really apply those kind of metrics to mind. One of the things that I find most often, especially when I'm teaching meditation to people, they naturally, and we all do this, we all naturally have this belief that our mind is this size. Somehow, I think it's because we live in the West and we have this brain-centric view of consciousness, that somehow the size of your brain is the size of your mind. And that's where it is. We're like driving this little human being all from behind our eyes somewhere. It's kind of weird when you think about it, but it's somehow an assumed default position that so many people have. Well, of course, the fact is that your consciousness is not the size of your head. It's not the size of a football. It is boundless. And simply inviting people to be aware of this can be quite a game changer for them, because especially if you're troubled by the occasional bit of agitation, aren't we all? If you imagine the agitation occurring in a vast sphere as large as the universe, well, it's like a tiny little bubble somewhere. Whereas if the agitation is occurring in something this size, well, it's pretty damn big, isn't it? So having that sense of boundlessness can actually help us contextualize our experience as we meditate. So I talked about clarity, I talked about boundlessness. The other third and most compelling and fantastic aspect of mind, which we can perceive directly for ourselves, is peacefulness, tranquility. Our minds, when they're free of agitation and free of dullness, are naturally oceanic, peaceful, tranquil. To me, it's almost like going below the surface in an ocean, getting to the bottom and finding this amazing oceanic peacefulness. And it's just to me, it's just incredible that people walk around stressed out, agitated, worried, anxious, depressed, and yet if they could only access what is below that level of negative cognition, negative chatter, they would discover that just like anyone else, they have access to this immense reservoir of peace and tranquility. In the East, there's a wonderful metaphor that if you told a very poor family living in a mud hut that just below the surface of their hut, there was a casket of treasure, the most amazing precious gold and jewels, what would that family do? Well, of course, they'd be getting every implement they could get their hands on and getting rid of the soil and the ground of their hut to get down to the treasure chest and get into the good stuff. It's exactly the same with our minds. We are those poor people, maybe not materially poor, but poor in terms of not understanding the treasure that we're sitting on, because each single one of us is sitting on this amazing treasury of mind, which is clear, boundless, and so tranquil. And allowing people or giving people this method of accessing that mind helps us really create an entirely new framework for our experience of reality. Obviously, in a very short presentation like this, I haven't had very much time to focus on so many different elements of mind watching, mind meditation. But just one thing before I talk you through a guided experience of it. Sometimes when people embark on this meditation, they feel a little bit kind of overwhelmed. They may think, you may think, oh, I like the idea of this, but I know what my mind is like. It's just going to be non-stop chatter from the moment I stop. Well, rest assured, if you keep your eyes wide open and wait for that negative cognition to arise, it'll never show its face. It's amazing, sometimes my Tibetan Lama, who is my very kind root guru, Geshe Acharya Thupten Lodin, used to say, if you're facing troubles, don't say, oh, I wish I didn't have so many troubles, I wish I could deal with X, Y, and Z. He used to say, bring it on. I want more difficulties, more troubles. I want to see, it needs a lot more than this for me to break. Now just show me, bring it on. And having this attitude of bring it on, this self-confidence, is so important, because the attitude in itself is what helps deflect negativity before it even starts. I sometimes talk about assuming the Clint Eastwood posture. In Dirty Harry, where he has a gun and he's just saying, go ahead, punk, make my day. He's just waiting for negative things to happen. He'll pull out that gun and shoot it. Well, it may seem a bit odd to mention or invoke Clint Eastwood in a meditation practice, but we need to assume the Clint Eastwood posture of being confident we can deal with any negative chatter, any chatter at all that arises during the course of this short session. We got the tools. Acknowledge, accept, let go. Boom, off it goes. So don't feel kind of somehow incapable or weak or whatever. You can do it, no question. Also, although in meditation we're never encouraged to switch the object of meditation during the course of it, when doing this particular one, it helps if just for a few moments we settle the mind by practicing a little bit of breath counting, because the breath is a very gross object, i.e. it's easy to find, whereas the mind is a more subtle one. And it's helpful just to settle the mind on something like a breath before we then move to a more subtle object. So in the remaining few minutes of this session, I'd like to talk you through a mind-watching mind meditation. So I'd like to invite you just to get into the optimal posture while I have a sip of water. The most important element of any meditation session, of course, is to have a nice straight back. I normally just put my hands on in my lap, right on left, thumb tips joined, or you can relax them on your knees if you like. There's very few rights and wrongs, either sitting down in a chair or on a meditation cushion, whatever works best for you. Tilt your head according to your current state of mind. So if you're feeling a bit agitated, tilt your head down. If on the other hand you're feeling a little bit drowsy, keep it more upright. I suggest that for the purposes of this meditation, you just shut your eyes, put the tip of your tongue on the roof of the mouth, and you're comfortably roll back your shoulders, and you're now in the optimal 7-point meditation posture. Take a few nice, very, very deep breaths. Really inflate your lungs to the maximum and let go. And as you let go of everything psychologically as well as physically. Everything in your entire life that you've ever done up until this moment is now officially irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Who cares? That was then. This is now. You're now in this present moment, the only moment that actually is of any consequence. And what I'd like you to do now, please, is simply focus your attention on the tip of your nostrils as you breathe in and breathe out. Simply focus on the sensation at the very tip of your nostrils, nowhere else. Like a sentry in a gatehouse, observing the flow of traffic in and out. Don't concern yourself with any other element of breathing. If you like, you can count your exhalations. 1, 2, and so on in cycles of 4. Just calm the mind by focusing on breath. Sometimes the mind is likened to a rider and the breath to a horse. Our objective is for the two of them to become one, non-dual. And having settled your mind to some extent, I would now like you please to focus on mind itself. If you've never done this experience before, you may wonder, where is my mind? What is mind? We're not looking for anything that's visual. The best way to find your mind for yourself is simply to await for a thought to arise, which probably already has. As soon as the thought arises, remember our key instruction for this meditation: acknowledge, accept, let go. Acknowledge because we're not pretending, we're not thinking, we are thinking. Accept because it doesn't matter what the thought is, what the content of the thought is, that's irrelevant. We're only concerned about the fact there's a bit of cognition occurring. And let go, because that's what this whole thing is about, letting go of negative thoughts or positive thoughts. In this case, it doesn't matter. Acknowledge, accept, let go. Even if you spend the entire session acknowledging, accepting, and letting go, that's a fantastic thing to do. By building up our muscles, if you like, our capacity to deal with cognition, we are improving our ability when we get off the cushion to deal with everyday life. So remember, simply await for a thought to arise, acknowledge, accept, and let go. Even if you have a whole swarm of thoughts arising at the same time, no problem. The same thing, let go of them all simultaneously. Remember to adopt the Clint Eastwood posture. Be confident. You can deal with thoughts. Go ahead, make my day. I'm waiting for you. As soon as they arise, we're going to acknowledge, accept, and let go. We'll let them have it. If it's at all possible, in the gaps between thoughts, see if you're able for yourself to observe the true nature of your own mind. Can you see how your mind is quite naturally clear, lucid, radiant? It enables any thought or sensation to arise quite naturally. Do you notice how your mind is boundless with no beginning or end? It's crazy even to try and apply those kind of descriptors to mind. And mind is naturally a very peaceful, tranquil place to be. We all possess within us access to this oceanic tranquility. Now, sadly, we only have half a minute of this session left. For the remaining 30 seconds, as much as possible, try to simply abide in the boundless clarity and tranquility that is the true nature of your own mind. May all beings have happiness and the true causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the true causes of suffering. May all beings never be parted from the happiness that is beyond suffering, and may all beings abide in peace and equanimity, their minds free of attachment and aversion, free from indifference. And may love, compassion, joy, and equanimity pervade the hearts and minds of all living beings throughout limitless space. Thank you, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this session.